Is good the enemy of great? We live in a world that often settles for good enough. A good job, a good company, a good life. But what if we are leaving our true potential on the table? What if, by settling for good, we are preventing ourselves from achieving something truly extraordinary? And what is the difference really between the good and the great? Is it just luck? Is it a matter of being in the right industry at the right time? Or are there a set of timeless, universal principles that can allow a person or an organization to make that rare and difficult leap? For 5 years, the management researcher Jim Collins and his dedicated team embarked on a massive, data-driven quest to answer that very question. They weren't interested in the companies that were born great. They were interested in the ugly ducklings, the boring, average, good companies that, at some specific point in their history, suddenly took off and achieved a level of sustained greatness that was truly exceptional. His masterpiece, Good to Great, is the result of that research. This is not a book of opinions, of theories, or of motivational platitudes. It is a profound philosophical and scientific roadmap for achieving a breakthrough. It is a guide to the timeless and often counterintuitive principles that separate the merely good from the truly great. Before we can understand the book's conclusions, we have to understand the incredible rigor of the research that produced them. This is what gives Good to Great its power and its authority. Collins and his team started by looking at every company that had made the Fortune 500 list since its inception. From this list of over 1,000 companies, they began a systematic search for a very specific and rare pattern. They were looking for companies that had been, for at least 15 years, just average. Good, but not great. Their stock returns had been at or below the general market average, and then, at a specific transition point, something changed. These companies suddenly began to produce extraordinary results, generating stock returns that were at least 3 times the market average, and sustaining that performance for at least 15 years. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Out of nearly 1,500 companies, they found only 11 that met these strict criteria. These were the good to great companies. They included names you might know, like Walgreens, Gillette, and Kimberly-Clark, but also many less famous, unglamorous companies that had quietly achieved spectacular results. But finding these 11 companies was only half the work. To truly understand what made them special, the researchers needed something to compare them to. So, for each good to great company, they selected a comparison company, a company that was in the same industry, had the same opportunities, and was in a similar position, but that never made the leap to greatness. And they also included a third group of unsustained greatness companies, companies that made a leap but couldn't hold on to it. And then, the real work began. They amassed a mountain of data. They read decades of articles, of annual reports, of analyst briefings. They conducted thousands of interviews. They looked at everything, trying to find the common patterns. What was different about the good to great companies? What did they do that the comparison companies didn't? The answers were not what they or anyone else expected. The first and perhaps most profound discovery of the entire study had to do with the leaders of these companies. We have a powerful myth in our culture about what a great leader looks like. We think of the larger-than-life celebrity CEO, the brilliant, charismatic, and often egocentric visionary who single-handedly transforms a company through the sheer force of their personality. Collins and his team went into the research expecting to find these kinds of leaders at the helm of the good-to-great companies, but what they found was the exact opposite. The good-to-great companies were not led by high-profile celebrity CEOs. In fact, the leaders of the comparison companies, the ones that failed to become great, were often much more famous and had much bigger egos. The leaders who had engineered the good-to-great transformations were a completely different breed. Collins calls them Level 5 leaders. A Level 5 leader is a study in duality, a profound and powerful paradox. On one hand, they are possessed of an intense, almost fanatical professional will. They are absolutely determined to see their company succeed. They are ambitious, but their ambition is for the company, not for themselves. They will do whatever it takes to make the company great. But on the other hand, they are possessed of a deep and genuine personal humility. They are not driven by ego, they are quiet, reserved, and even shy. When things go well, they look out the window and give the credit to their team, to their predecessors, or to good luck. When things go badly, they look in the mirror and take full personal responsibility. Collins uses the wonderful metaphor of the plow horse versus the show horse. The level 5 leader is the plow horse, the one who just puts their head down and does the work day in and day out, for the good of the farm. The high-ego celebrity CEO is the show horse, beautiful and flashy, but often more concerned with their own image than with the long-term health of the organization. The story of Darwin Smith, the CEO who transformed the boring old paper company Kimberly-Clark into a world-class consumer goods giant, is a perfect example. He was a shy, awkward, and deeply humble man who, after being diagnosed with cancer and given less than a year to live, went on to lead his company for another 25 years, creating extraordinary results, all while remaining almost completely unknown to the outside world. This discovery of level 5 leadership is the first and most important principle of the book. Greatness, it turns out, begins with humility. So what is the first job of a level 5 leader? Is it to create a new vision, a new strategy, a new grand plan? No. The second great principle of the book is a simple and powerful idea. First who, then what. The good to great leaders understood that the single most important asset of any organization is not its products, its technology, or its strategy. It is the people. So, before they figured out where they were going to drive the bus, they focused all their energy on one thing: getting the right people on the bus, getting the wrong people off the bus, and getting the right people in the right seats. This is another profoundly counterintuitive idea. Most leaders think their job is to come up with a brilliant vision and then to find people who can execute that vision. The good to great leaders did the opposite. They started by finding a team of brilliant, self-motivated, and disciplined people. And then, they worked with that team to figure out what the best path to greatness would be. Why is this so important? Because if you have the right people, you are much more adaptable to a changing world. If your strategy needs to change, the right people will be able to pivot and figure it out. But if you have the wrong people, even the most brilliant strategy in the world will fail. And what defines the right people? It's not just about their skills or their experience, it is first and foremost about their character. The good to great companies hired for character, for discipline, and for a strong work ethic, knowing that you can always teach someone the specific skills they need for a job. But you can't teach them character. This principle also has a tough and equally important flip side. The good to great leaders were not afraid to be rigorous in getting the wrong people off the bus. They understood that keeping the wrong person on the team is unfair to all the right people, who have to constantly compensate for their shortcomings. But when they did have to let someone go, they did it with respect and humanity. As the book famously says, you have to be rigorous, not ruthless. Once you have a humble leader and a bus full of the right people, what's next? The third great principle is about the psychology of greatness. It is the commitment to confront the brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. To explain this, Collins introduces another powerful and unforgettable concept, the Stockdale Paradox. This is named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was the highest-ranking American POW in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. He was tortured for over 7 years with no certainty that he would ever be released. When Collins asked Stockdale who didn't make it out of the prison camps, his answer was surprising. It wasn't the pessimists, it was the optimists. The optimists were the ones who would say, "We're going to be out by Christmas." And Christmas would come, and Christmas would go. Then they would say, "We're going to be out by Easter." And Easter would come, and Easter would go. And eventually, they died of a broken heart. Stockdale's philosophy for survival was a paradox. On one hand, he maintained an unwavering, almost religious faith that he would get out, that he would prevail in the end, and that he would turn the experience into the defining event of his life. But at the very same time, he confronted the brutal day-to-day reality of his situation with absolute clarity. He never confused his ultimate faith with the need to deal with the grim reality of the present moment. This is the Stockdale Paradox. You must maintain an unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end, and, at the same time, you must have the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. The good to great companies all embodied this paradox. They were not companies of blind optimism. They created a culture where the truth was heard, where people could debate and disagree, and where the most brutal facts of their situation were always on the table. This commitment to brutal honesty is what allowed them to make the right decisions and to navigate through their darkest days. With the right people on the bus and a culture of brutal honesty, the good to great companies then had to figure out their strategy. And they did so by using another beautifully simple and powerful idea, the Hedgehog Concept. This idea comes from an ancient Greek parable that says, "The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing." The fox is a clever, cunning creature who is always chasing a dozen different ideas at once. The hedgehog is a simple, unassuming creature. It doesn't look very impressive, but it can do one thing perfectly. It can defend itself by rolling into a spiky ball. And it does this one thing over and over, and it always wins against the fox. The comparison companies were like foxes. They were always chasing the next new trend. They were in a dozen different businesses, and they lacked a simple, coherent vision. The good to great companies, on the other hand, were all hedgehogs. Through a process of deep, honest reflection, they were able to find the one simple, central idea that they could pursue with relentless, single-minded focus. The hedgehog concept is not a goal or a strategy. It is a deep understanding of what you are, and it is found at the intersection of three simple, clarifying questions. First, what can you be the best in the world at? This is not about what you want to be the best at. It is an honest assessment of what you have the genetic or organizational potential to do better than anyone else. Second, what drives your economic engine? What is the single key metric, the denominator, that has the greatest impact on your economic success? And third, what are you deeply passionate about? What is the work that you love to do, the work that inspires you and your team to your very core? The good to great companies were able to find the overlapping point of these three circles. Walgreens figured out that their hedgehog was to be the best, most convenient drugstore with a high profit per customer visit. They didn't try to be the cheapest. They didn't try to be a giant superstore. They just focused with hedgehog-like simplicity on being the most convenient. This simple, elegant concept became their North Star, guiding all of their decisions for decades. The final piece of the puzzle is about how the transformation from good to great actually happens. In our culture, we have this myth of the dramatic, revolutionary breakthrough. We imagine that there is a single miracle moment, a single killer app, or a brilliant new strategy that changes everything overnight. Collins and his team found that this is a complete and utter fantasy. In every single one of the good to great companies, the transformation was not a dramatic event. It was a slow, cumulative, and often unglamorous process. He calls this the flywheel effect. Imagine a giant, heavy 5,000-pound metal flywheel mounted on an axle. Your job is to get it spinning. You put your shoulder to it and you begin to push. The first turn is incredibly difficult. It moves with agonizing slowness. You keep pushing. The second turn is a little easier. The third turn is a little easier still. You keep pushing, day in and day out, in the same, consistent direction. The flywheel begins to build momentum. After a long period of relentless, unglamorous pushing, you finally hit a point of breakthrough. The flywheel's own momentum begins to work for you, and it starts to spin faster and faster, seemingly of its own accord. This is what the transformation from good to great looks like from the inside. It's not a single miraculous push. It is the result of 1,000 small, disciplined pushes, all compounding on each other over a long period of time. The comparison companies, on the other hand, were trapped in what Collins calls the doom loop. They were always looking for the miracle moment. They would launch a new flashy program with great fanfare. It wouldn't produce immediate spectacular results, so they would abandon it and lurch in a different direction, launching another new flashy program. They were constantly trying to find a magic bullet, and as a result they never built up any real sustainable momentum. The final powerful message of good to great is that there are no secret formulas, no magic bullets. The journey from good to great is a matter of discipline. It is about having the discipline to get the right people on the bus, the discipline to confront the brutal facts, the discipline to find your hedgehog concept, and the discipline to push, day after day, on the flywheel. These are simple principles, but they are not easy. They are a profound and timeless philosophy for anyone who is not content with just being good, and who is willing to do the hard, quiet work of building something truly great. If that is an inquiry that speaks to you, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe and let's continue to explore the philosophies of excellence together.